If it's your first time tuning into Kiwi Dazz, spoiler alert, it's the grand finale of the Great Gates project. The planning and hard work pay off. Gates swing both ways like Freddie Mercury and look like a Bohemian Rhapsody. I install stained horizontal timber slats that look so juicy and delicious on the black steel frames, you'll be trying to lick them off your screen.
Oh my god, Dazz, they're just driveway gates, not a goody goody gumdrops ice cream.
Click the playlist here to check out all the action from the 8 previous episodes. Episode 1, where post holes are dug and Kiwi Shaz makes her YouTube shade-throwing debut.
Oh my god, Dazz, seriously, aren't you finished yet? Can you get a wriggle on?
Episode 2, where the Dazz descaler dissolves the mill scale, prepping the steel for welding. Introducing the Dazz descaler, trademark and patent pending. 3, a crowd favourite where I weld perfectly square gate frames with a clever little DIY jig. This is my right angle welding jig. I built it in a previous video, but today it's really going to earn its keep. Kiwi bro eats all my bickies while getting schooled on basics physics and how to brace gates. Oh hey, that skinny little wire holds those bickies, no worries. I fab up steel tabs that are going to make this episode of fixing the timber on a breeze. I unwarp the warp frames with some Kiwi ingenuity and a car jack. Dazz makes an epic fail by spilling paint on the freshly powder coated gate frame's deck and driveway. Lessons I learned from the powder coater on this project and the drama of a massive disaster. And the last episode where my cunning plan to weld the hinges on first pays off when I concrete in the steel posts. What do you reckon? Should I have just welded the hinges on after like everybody else? Leave me a comment on what you think.
Oh my god, Dazz, are you finally gonna finish something?
That's right, Shaz. I got a bunch of little steps to finish the gates, but in this episode, they're getting done. Okay, so I gotta unload timber, cut it to length, mark out the horizontal fixing points, drill the horizontals, sand everything, stain everything, mark out the spacings, fix the verticals and horizontals, fix the cappings, replace the pavers around the posts, some blockings to stop the dogs, and we're done. It's always wise to go to the hardware store with the lengths and multiples of those lengths you need in mind to minimise waste. This is all kiln dried timber, but you still don't want to leave it out in the sun or it will warp and bow. Time to chop it all to length. A drop saw, or choppy choppy, is choice as for a bunch of repetitive cuts like this. This one's a sliding compound miter version and probably the most used tool in my shop. I've got a collapsible stand for it and use a couple of cheap height adjustable rollers to set and catch the wood with. These gates are part of my house curb appeal, and I think a touch of wood on a house stops it looking all 50 shades of grey and adds a bit of natural warmth. I've already used it on my entry porch and small gate on the other side of the house, so it was a natural choice for this project. My house was originally built in the late 70s, and I'm renovating it with a modern style, so the timber is going to be run horizontally with a small gap between the slats for a slick craftsman vibe. The end of the timber sometimes has little splits from the drying process, so I work out how much excess I have to work with and trim these off to start. Choppy Choppy makes stealth work of this job, and now I can store them all out of the sun on my workshop bench. Marky time. I have 36 horizontals, 18 for each gate, and they all need 3 sets of 2 countersunk holes for fixing onto the 6 timber verticals. When you have a bunch of identical items like this, it's wise to get jiggy. I chop a little piece of timber to the length I want the holes from the edge of the boards and mark the spacing for the 2 holes on its edge. I then get jiggier and clamp a couple of pieces of wood to the table to make lining up the jig fast. I mark out the centre point on the clamped piece of wood for marking the central holes and I'm off. It's wise to double and triple check your jigs when doing something like this, as you could end up with 36 stuff-ups if you get it all wrong. I used a vivid Sharpie marker pen or whatever you call it to make the marks, as it's going to make it easier to see than a pencil and means I can just make a quick reference dot using my jig. Marky done. Time for Drilly Drilly. There's over 200 holes needed. You could use a hand drill, but I'll use the drill press because I have one. I'm also using this special drill bit that drills the hole and countersinks all in one with an adjustable spinning collar that sets the depth. I love this little countersinking bit and use it all the time. I bang on the tunes and churn this task out. Drilly Drilly done and onto Sandy Sandy. I'm using a gauged finished timber that's typically used for decking, so it doesn't need much of a sand. I give it all a quick whiz over with some 120 grit sandpaper on the mouse sander, mostly to tidy up the cut edges and countersinks. The only tip I have here is don't be a Scrooge on your sandpaper. Sandpaper will lose its effectiveness before it looks that worn out, and if you value your time, it's a good idea to change it out as soon as it starts feeling smoother to the touch than a new sheet, or it stops working as quickly. It's late and the inspectors want dinner and cuddles, so I'll get back to it tomorrow. I am using pressure treated pine except for the two pieces to cap the top that are Quila, a hardwood that's more naturally weather resistant. I've found on my outdoor projects that the pine will need constant staining and gets tired pretty fast if it's laid flat, facing the sun and getting water sitting on it. That's why I'm using the hardwood on top where it will take a beating. The hardwood is way denser and heavier on the gate hinges and your wallet, so I haven't done the whole gate with it. I have a little hack I use on all my outdoor projects. I use the hardwood where it matters, places it needs to wear better, and places you touch it or look at it closely as it's definitely a little prettier. To blend the two timbers together and give the illusion of high end, I use a stain colour that brings the pine closer to the hardwood in colour. The stain colour I'm using is called Quila. Classic Kiwi ingenuity. I give them a coat, let them dry in the shade on the driveway to avoid warping the timber, and hit them with a second coat a couple days later. Once the stain's dry, I mark out all the battens on the verticals so I can Lego it all together. I subtract the combined width of all the battens and then divide the remaining by the number of spaces to calculate the gaps. It's wise marking stuff out on the bench rather than on a gate or wall where your ruler is fighting gravity. I hacked this repetitive job by aligning all 6 verticals on my bench and marking them all at once. Time to fixie fixie. I clamp the verticals in place and spend a bit of time tapping them to get them exactly in the right position. I want the battens to align from one gate to the next. I also want the gate to meet in the middle with an even gap, and I want the top batten to align nicely with the top of the gate frame for when I attach the cap pieces at the end. Once I'm happy, I attach them from the back using the fixing tabs I welded on for this purpose, meaning I can just use standard wood screws. I use really short ones as I don't want them sticking through. Sanding and grinding and welding and planning and digging and nailing and whistling and prepping and singing and marking and cutting and pointing and routing and forever caulking. With Kiwi Dazz getting it done, eh? Lots of fixie. Fixing the horizontal is pretty straightforward, just clamp them in place using the lines I've already marked on the verticals. I find if you clamp them close to where you want them and then tap them into position with a hammer or block of wood, it's quicker and easier than trying to clamp them perfectly from the get-go. I also have a chisel on hand to use as a lever when I need to push the batten up a little bit against the other ones. I have slightly longer but still short screws that I am using to fix the horizontals onto the vertical battens. I'm stoked with how this method has paid off at this point. I could have not used the vertical pieces of wood or the fixing tabs that I welded onto the frames, which would have seemed faster and less work. But this method has saved me heaps of time and effort, as using self-drilling or self-tapping screws would have been much slower at this point and more difficult and would have filled my metal frames with holes. I am able to set the clutch on my drill to avoid over-tightening the screws and smash out this task. It was a nice sunny day, so I took off for a swim with the family 3/4 of the way through this task, and I finished it off the next day. I also installed my custom sliding bolt at this point, as it's notched into the verticals. But if you want more detail on that, just smash the like button and subscribe to Kiwi Dazz, as that video will be dropping soon. With the end in sight, I mark out the 2 pieces of hardwood that will cap the top of the gates. These should keep some of the rain off the gates and help them to weather a bit better. I countersink all the holes like I did on the horizontals and clamp and fix them to the top of the gates. I need to give the corner of the cap a little sand as it's catching on my post. Just some little bits to tidy up now. When I was attaching the post to the fence, I rushed it and didn't pre-drill the screw holes. One of the screws snapped off, so I used some vice grips to work it back out and drill the hole before putting in a new screw. I put some pieces of paver back in around the post using a bit of sand. I also screw a couple of bits of wood together, paint them, and attach them to the timber foundation of the house to block off a gap that one of my dogs can squeeze through. On the next episode of Kiwi Dazz Getting It Done, I'll go into detail on the custom latch that I made for these gates that I can open from both sides and lock with a padlock. Following that, I've got some floating shelves I built for the lounge, and then the next major project on the channel will be my master bedroom renovation, including a feature wall and a secret door. If you've watched this far, thank you, and please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already.
Oh my God, Daz, you finally finished the gates. Are you going to finish renovating the house now?